"Latte for table 3, she called, voice steady, hands moving with practiced grace. A man at the counter scowled. Finally, he muttered, tapping his foot impatiently. She glanced at him briefly, nodded, and placed the cup carefully on the tray. From behind, the manager leaned over, jaw tight. "You're moving too slow. Do you even know what you're doing?" Her fingers paused on the next cup. I'm doing my best," she said softly, keeping her tone neutral. The manager's eyes narrowed. "Your best isn't good enough. Here, not in this cafe," a coworker muttered, barely audible. "Leave her alone." The manager shot them a glare. "Back to work. All of you." She kept pouring, her hands shaking slightly, though no one noticed. Orders stacked, customers whispered, some nodding sympathetically, others judging without words. "Excuse me," a patron said, voice tight. "My drink." She stepped forward, coming right up, and handed it over carefully. The manager's smirk widened. "Do you think anyone sees your effort? Do you see the mistake? That's all they'll remember." She swallowed the lump in her throat, breathed. "Some things are bigger than me," she reminded herself silently. A beep from the register cut through the tension. She glanced at the line of waiting patrons, the murmurs, the subtle glances of her colleagues. The manager folded his arms, watching her, chest tight. "This ends today." She didn't respond. She simply nodded, adjusting her apron, lifting her chin, holding herself upright as the cafe buzzed around her. In that room, full of noise and whispers, her calm became a quiet declaration. He stepped closer, eyes narrowing, voice low but cutting. "Really? That's how you handle a simple order?" She straightened, hands gripping the counter. "I have followed the recipe exactly," she said softly. He tapped the edge of the counter, leaning in. "Exactly. Do you see the line growing? The customer staring. This isn't about the recipe, it's about competence." Her stomach tightened. He's watching every move, she thought. Fingers trembled slightly as she wiped a spill that hadn't even mattered before. Most people manage this better," he continued, tone icy. "Maybe it's a lack of attention." She swallowed hard. "I'm paying attention, I promise." A coworker cleared their throat, eyes darting nervously. The manager snapped at them. "Stay out of this." He circled behind the counter, gaze sharp. "I don't understand how you've lasted this long here." Her pulse raced. "I've always done my best." He laughed quietly, a sharp sound that carried through the cafe. "Your best isn't enough. It never has been. Maybe people just tolerate you because it's convenient." She paused, breathing deliberately, holding herself upright. "I can't let him see me break," she reminded herself. "Look at the line," he barked suddenly. "Look at them." Her eyes swept over impatient customers. Some avoided her gaze. A few shot sympathetic glances. She exhaled slowly. "I see them," she said quietly. He stepped back, frown deepening. "This ends today," he muttered under his breath, barely audible. She nodded once, calm, composed, letting the words settle in the space between them. Silence stretched, louder than any shout, signaling that the next move might define everything. "You're done here." Her chest tightened. She swallowed, keeping her voice steady. "I understand." The words barely left her mouth before a hush fell over the cafe. Customers paused mid-sip, eyes flicking between her and the manager. A faint murmur ran through the staff. Nobody moved first. Everyone waited, uncertain. He folded his arms, jaw clenched. "Do you have any idea what you just hired?" "You," she interrupted softly, eyes forward, refusing to meet his gaze. "I know." He stepped closer. "You think standing there quietly makes it okay? It doesn't. You've embarrassed me." She drew a breath, calm but measured. "Embarrassment fades. I just did my job." A coworker shifted, whispering under their breath. "I can't believe he just." The manager whirled, glare snapping. "To them, don't even think about it." She continued straightening the counter, deliberately slow, deliberate. Every movement quiet but intentional. The ambient clatter of coffee machines and cups now felt like a soft applause, a rhythm of her composure against his rising agitation. "People are watching," he muttered, voice low, almost to himself. "Do you understand that?" "I do," she replied, finally looking at him for the briefest moment, her eyes calm, unwavering. "And I'm ready for it." He exhaled sharply, fists unclenching slightly, realizing his usual power had no grip. Here silence hung longer than any words could. She didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to fight. All around, subtle nods, sympathetic glances, and quiet tension acknowledged her dignity. The cafe waited for the next act, knowing it had already shifted without shouting. Without drama, the balance had quietly begun to tip. She moved slowly, hands steady, placing a cappuccino in front of a customer who hesitated, sensing the quiet storm around them. Thanks, the customer muttered, eyes darting between her and the manager. A co-worker shifted behind the counter, leaning slightly toward another. Did you see that? The other shook their head, whispering, I can't. I just can't. She caught their movement from the corner of her eye, but stayed focused on her work. Every motion, deliberate, controlled. Let them watch, she thought. Let them see what calm looks like. The manager's jaw tightened. Stop staring at me, he snapped under his breath, voice low but tense. She didn't answer. Her silence spoke louder than any words could, a quiet defiance in the rhythm of pouring, wiping, adjusting. A customer at the front leaned toward a friend. Do you see how she's handling this? She hasn't even reacted. The friend whispered back. It's like she's untouchable. The murmurs spread subtly, threads of acknowledgement weaving through the room. Whispers, quiet, nods, hesitant smiles, tiny ripples that felt monumental. Behind the counter, another co-worker let out a barely audible sigh. The manager's hands twitched. He glanced at them, realizing their allegiance was shifting, even slightly. She placed a tray down, paused, and straightened her apron. Is there anything else I can get for you? The customers shook their heads. Watching silence became attention, attention became respect, and respect, though unspoken, began tilting the balance. He stepped back, expression faltering, the weight of observation pressing in. The cafe no longer belonged solely to him. It belonged to the quiet dignity standing firm at the center of it all. Her hands paused over the espresso machine, a familiar rhythm breaking under the weight of memory. Every time, they looked past me, as if I were invisible, she thought. Next. In line, a supervisor had once snapped, ignoring her raised hand for a promotion. She had nodded silently, swallowing disappointment. Of course, she whispered to herself, walking back to her station. Another time. A colleague had smirked during a team meeting. Maybe some people just aren't cut out for this, he said, glancing her way. Laughter followed, subtle but sharp, and she had smiled politely, hiding the sting. She remembered filing complaints that disappeared into folders labeled not urgent or follow up later. HR had nodded, made sympathetic faces, yet nothing changed. It's always easier to ignore me, she realized, inhaling slowly, steadying her pulse. Even customers had contributed in small ways. Dismissive tones, whispered assumptions, reluctant acknowledgement of her skill. Each tiny act of disrespect stacked quietly, invisibly, shaping a lifetime of careful endurance. A coworker had once whispered after a meeting, "They don't see you the way they see others." She had nodded, not wanting to draw attention, letting it pass. Now, standing in the cafe, she felt those past dismissals align like invisible threads that had taught her patience, resilience, and unwavering composure. Through it all, she muttered under her breath. Every single time, she adjusted her apron, eyes forward, letting the present moment reclaim her. The past sharpened her awareness, strengthened her stillness, and framed the silent defiance. That would not break today. They've underestimated me for years, she thought. Today is just another moment they'll regret. The door chimed as it opened. A tall figure entered, sharp suit, confident stride. Most patrons didn't notice. Their eyes were fixed on spilled cups, whispered tension, the silent war unfolding. Behind the counter, he paused near the center, scanning the room. Something glittered faintly around her neck, a delicate pendant catching the overhead lights. His brow lifted, subtle but unmistakable. "Excuse me, miss," he began softly, addressing no one in particular. "Can I ask about that necklace?" Her hands froze for a fraction of a second before settling on the counter. She tilted her head slightly, eyes steady. "It's my grandmother's," she said, quiet, measured. A ripple passed through the manager. He straightened, forced composure, voice tight. "Sir, this is our employee, just finishing her shift." "Noted," the CEO replied, calm yet authoritative, tone holding weight beyond the room's chaos. He stepped closer, gaze unwavering. "I've seen many things today, but this detail deserves attention." Co-workers exchanged stolen glances, murmurs dying in their throats. Patrons shifted uneasily, sensing a new presence, a pivot in the room's energy. The manager's hands tightened into fists behind his back, jaw twitching. His words faltered. "Aye, she's witty." The CEO's eyes met the barista's. Nothing needed explaining. Silence spoke volumes. Her posture was perfect. Calm, resilient, luminous, even amid tension. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly, then turned, moving toward the register, leaving the manager exposed in the quiet weight of observation. Narration hovered briefly. No one noticed the silence that fell, until he did. Every small glance, every shallow breath, every whispered thought frozen. The cafe felt suspended, poised on the cusp of change. Even the outside world seemed to hold its breath, unaware of the moment where quiet dignity had begun shifting power. The manager's fingers drummed on the counter, impatient, eyes darting toward every misplaced cup, every hesitation. He leaned slightly, whispering under his breath, "Unbelievable," loud enough for nearby co-workers to catch. No one spoke. The barista continued her motions, precise, calm, unbroken. "Could you move faster? Some of us have places to be," he said, voice clipped, forcing his irritation into a public display. Her hands didn't shake. They glided over the espresso machine, each movement controlled, deliberate. A co-worker shifted uncomfortably, lowering eyes, sensing the tension rising, like heat in a closed room. Another murmured, "This is wrong," but quickly swallowed the words. The barista's calm made his agitation appear sharper, more pronounced, like a spotlight on every microaggression. "Do you even know what you're doing?" he asked. Pacing, gestures sharp. He jabbed a finger at a dropped napkin, his frustration laced with disdain he had masked for months. She bent briefly to pick it up, voice soft. "I'll take care of it." The CEO's gaze lingered from across the cafe. Quiet, assessing. The manager's forced authority faltered under observation. Every small, dismissive action amplified in this new scrutiny. "I can't believe this," the manager muttered, pausing mid-step, hands tightening. His jaw twitched. His composure cracked under the weight of eyes silently judging him. Narration punctuated the space. Every gesture, every glance, had meaning now. What was once ignored had become undeniable. The quiet cruelty had a witness, and the world shifted subtly around it. The barista continued calmly, each measured motion reclaiming authority silently. Patrons shifted, co-workers whispered, a low hum of awareness building. His power, once absolute, now faltered under the subtle observation, and the invisible walls he'd built around his behavior began to crumble. The CEO's eyes swept across the cafe, settling not on spilled coffee or misaligned cups, but on the barista's hands, steady despite the tremor in her jaw. He leaned slightly against the doorframe, silent, almost invisible, yet every movement commanded presence. "She's handling this better than anyone could," he murmured, more to himself than to the assistant beside him. The manager glanced up, noticing the intrusion. "Sir, he started, voice shaky, but the CEO didn't move, didn't interrupt. "She's doing her job," the CEO said softly, almost a whisper, and the weight in the statement cut deeper than any reprimand. The manager's face tightened, fingers flexed, jaw clenched. "I don't understand. You were wrong," the CEO interrupted quietly, calm, precise. And everyone saw it. A pause hung heavy in the room. Co-workers exchanged fleeting glances, a silent acknowledgement, passing among them. The barista kept working, eyes forward, breathing controlled, every subtle gesture of composure now magnified under the CEO's quiet observation. I didn't think," the manager stammered, lips trembling. "You didn't notice," the CEO said, voice steady, "but I did, and now, so did they." He gestured subtly toward the staff, nodding almost imperceptibly. "Some things can't be ignored, even in silence." Narration surfaced softly. True authority doesn't always raise its voice. It waits, it observes, and when it chooses to act, the imbalance becomes undeniable. The manager's shoulders slumped, the forced dominance dissolving in the face of calm recognition. The barista straightened slightly, just enough to reclaim the space that had long been denied to her. A quiet ripple of awareness passed through the room, small, silent, but irrevocable. The CEO's gaze lingered a moment longer, approving, and then he turned away, leaving the tension to settle, permanent and exposed. The cafe's usual hum had evaporated. Cups clinked once, then stillness reclaimed the air. She wiped a counter, deliberately slow, every movement precise, her eyes forward yet aware of the weight around her. Patrons paused mid-sip, staff halted mid-sip, all sensing a tension they couldn't name. The manager shifted uncomfortably, lips pressed tight, eyes darting to the CEO. "Sir." She's the CEO raised a finger, silent. His gaze didn't leave her not once, and the gesture made the manager flinch. "She's holding herself together," whispered an assistant behind the counter. The manager swallowed hard, trying to form words. You weren't paying attention," the CEO said, calm, almost gentle, yet the weight of authority pressed down on every syllable. "And now, everyone sees." Narration lingered quietly, Silence has a voice. In that suspended moment, judgment and dignity clash, and the balance shifts without a single raised tone. She set the last cup in its place and inhaled slowly. One deliberate exhale. The tiniest smile curved her lips, a victory unnoticed by most, yet undeniable. Manager's face paled, his confident posture faltered, shoulders sagging under invisible scrutiny. "I didn't realize you did." Eventually, the CEO said softly, voice steady, unwavering, "And that's what matters." Staff exchanged subtle nods, understanding. Patrons lingered on stolen glances, sensing a power realignment they had only felt instinctively before. The cafe, a microcosm of hierarchy, had shifted quietly, irreversibly. She continued her work, composed, eyes forward. The silence held, pregnant with recognition. One final glance from the CEO, approving, and he stepped back. The world outside might rush on, but inside, the air had changed. Authority and dignity now balanced. Every observer forever aware that restraint can speak louder than any shout. She straightened a chair, hands steady, breathing measured. Manager's jaw tightened so visibly it seemed to cut through the air between them. The CEO's gaze lingered longer than before, eyes narrowing not in anger, but calculation, curiosity, and recognition. The manager exhaled slowly, muttering under his breath, "This wasn't supposed to happen, you weren't ready." The CEO said, voice calm, deliberate, "And now it's too late to look away." A coworker, leaning slightly against the counter, whispered to another, "Did you see that?" She didn't flinch once. Another patron, mid-order, paused, glancing at her with something like awe, though they quickly looked away. The manager's fingers tapped a restless rhythm on the counter. I don't know what to say. She's composed. Perfectly composed." "Exactly," the CEO said softly. "Composure tells more than any apology or outburst. It exposes what silence can't hide." She took a small step toward the back of the cafe, eyes scanning briefly for reactions. Subtle nods, quiet acknowledgement, avoided stares, but the energy had shifted. The power dynamic she had endured for months trembled in that frozen moment. Narration, a second can hold more than time allows. In that fraction, authority, dignity, and truth realigned without violence or noise. One glance, one pause, and the room itself seemed to breathe differently. The manager tried a smile. Awkward, forced, but it faltered before it reached his eyes. I guess things will have to change." "Yes," the CEO replied, tone low, almost a whisper, "but only if we see them clearly now." Her lips curved faintly, not triumph, not mockery, just acknowledgement. And for the first time in months, the cafe felt like her space. The pause stretched, palpable, as though the air itself waited for someone to break it. But no one moved, no one spoke. The moment held, fragile yet infinite. A barista leaned against the counter, fingers drumming lightly, eyes flicking toward her. "Did you see that?" She didn't flinch once, he whispered, voice low enough to be almost swallowed by the clatter of cups. Another coworker glanced nervously at the manager, then back at her. "I don't know what we're supposed to do now. He's here, the CEO, and we all saw it." The manager muttered under his breath, rubbing the back of his neck. "I thought she'd break. I never thought she'd hold herself like that." "She's not just holding herself," the barista said, quiet but sharp. "She's showing us all what silence can do." A third employee, voice trembling slightly, added, "Everyone's looking, even the customers. I think she changed something." The manager's eyes narrowed. "Changed something? Don't read too much into it. She didn't need to say a word." Another coworker replied, almost reverently. The moment said everything. Narration whispers traveled like a quiet current, threading through the cafe, carrying acknowledgement, doubt, and fear. Every glance, every shift in posture became loaded with new meaning. She's right," the barista admitted reluctantly, "and we've been blind to it, all of us." The manager exhaled sharply, pinching the bridge of his nose. "I guess there's no putting it back. Not anymore. She forced us to see," a coworker whispered again, a faint edge of admiration in their tone. "Not through yelling, not through pleading, just standing there." The cafe's rhythm resumed, but subtly altered, cups clinking, orders called, yet each sound was shadowed by quiet tension. Eyes met briefly and shifted away. The authority that had always been unquestioned now wavered, exposed in the stillness behind counters. Narration. In that silence, loyalties realigned, and the smallest gestures, nods, glances, hesitant movements spoke, louder than any reprimand could. The staff had witnessed a quiet revolution, and no one could ignore it. Her phone buzzed lightly in her pocket. She slid it open, scrolling past routine notifications, until a series of old emails and performance reviews flashed across the screen. That one, the promotion I never got, she murmured, lips barely moving, fingers hovering over the screen. A coworker at the counter, noticing the faint tremor in her hands, whispered, "Everything all right?" "I'm fine," she said, voice steady, but her mind traced each slight, each dismissal. Every time her effort had been overlooked, the cafe's background noise became muted, replaced by the echo of past frustrations. She handled that like a storm passing through. Another whispered behind the counter, never flinched. Narration. She remembered the manager's condescending smiles, the way some colleagues laughed just a second too long at a careless remark, and how complaints vanished into bureaucracy like they had never existed. Each memory pressed against her, heavy but sharpened her focus. She tapped on an old memo, detailing a colleague promoted over her, despite her achievements. A small smile touched her lips, not of amusement, but quiet recognition. "I've learned to hold my ground," she said softly, almost to herself. Another coworker glanced sideways. "It's amazing how calm she stays." After all that, her eyes lingered on the screen. Narration. Every instance of unfairness, every microaggression, every overlooked effort, no longer felt like personal defeat. It had become fuel, a quiet, simmering power that refused to be ignored. "She's untouchable when she wants to be," someone muttered. "Yes," she whispered, standing straighter, "because dignity doesn't need permission." The manager shifted, uneasy, realizing the tide had turned not through confrontation, but through endurance and observation. Narration. The system had long protected the powerful. Now, it was exposed to the force it had ignored for too long, and she knew this time it might finally crack. Her phone vibrated incessantly. Notifications stacked rapidly, messages, mentions, retweets. She stared calm, scrolling through the flood of attention. "Look at this," a coworker whispered, holding out their phone. "It's everywhere." She leaned closer, eyes steady. The clip replayed, the manager's harsh words, her unflinching composure. Every gesture, every pause, magnified on screen. Narration. A 30-second moment had become a mirror, reflecting not her weakness, but their misjudgment. "People are calling out the whole thing." Another murmured from behind the counter. "Microaggressions, the dismissals, everything." She didn't smile, but her chest felt lighter. "It's finally seen," she whispered. The manager, across the cafe, noticed a subtle shift. Conversations had slowed, whispers had risen. Some staff hovered over their phones. Narration. Authority that once went unquestioned now flickered under the scrutiny of countless unseen eyes. "She's composed," a barista said softly, almost reverently. While he looked small, her gaze lifted, meeting the manager's. From across the room, he cleared his throat, the rigidity in his shoulders unmistakable. "This isn't how I wanted this," he muttered, voice tight. "Then perhaps it's time things changed," she replied softly, words measured, heavy. The CEO, watching quietly, didn't intervene yet, letting the ripple form naturally. Narration. The world outside paused, judgment crystallizing. Each share, each comment, strengthened the quiet power she had carried unnoticed for years. Her coworkers watched, some inspired, some hesitant. Even silence now felt loaded with acknowledgement. "She's teaching all of us something," one murmured. "Yes," another replied. "Restraint can be louder than yelling." Her phone buzzed again. She looked down, then back up, eyes steady. Narration. A single, composed act had traveled farther than any raised voice, and the reckoning was only beginning. The HR office was quiet. Phones buzzed faintly on desks, but no one reached for them. Papers shuffled nervously, a subtle rhythm matching the unspoken tension. "Did you see the clip?" one officer finally whispered, eyes darting toward the other. "I did," replied another, voice tight, almost accusatory of themselves. "And it's not just him. We ignored it for years." A third cleared their throat. "We've tolerated microaggressions, small dismissals, thinking it wasn't our place. But now, it's public." He leaned back, fingers steepled, silent. Narration. For years, the system had shielded those in power, letting subtle cruelty pass unnoticed. Now hesitation carried more weight than authority ever had. "Should we act?" one asked, almost inaudibly. "Act how?" another shot back, voice strained. "We confront him, and we risk everything, but we stay silent, and the world watches." That silence is deafening. A pause. Everyone avoided looking directly at each other, but tension hummed in the air. "She's composed," someone muttered, eyes on the screen replaying the viral clip, calm while he looks unraveled. And we've got to decide if we're on the right side. The lead officer exhaled sharply, jaw tight. It's bigger than a firing now. It's accountability. Public, undeniable. Even if we step in, whispered another, he's got influence. Years of protection. She can withstand influence. Someone replied quietly. She's survived worse. Quietly, deliberately. Maybe we should follow her lead instead of clinging to old hierarchies. Narration, hesitation was no longer cowardice, was the tension before a shift in balance. The power had quietly moved, and now, even those meant to enforce rules felt its pull. Silence stretched. Phones vibrated, emails pinged, yet no one reached. They waited, watching, calculating, knowing the quiet had become louder than any authority. Cafe door jingled softly as a young reporter stepped inside, notebook in hand. She lingered near the counter, eyes scanning the tension still hanging in the air. "Excuse me," she said quietly, voice low so as not to disturb the stillness. "Did you see that?" She glanced at a co-worker who avoided her gaze. She didn't even fight back. A barista swallowed hard, glancing toward the manager, who now fidgeted with a pen, jaw tight. It wasn't right. The barista whispered, eyes flicking back to the woman sitting calmly at a table. The reporter nodded, scribbling quickly. The courage, it's remarkable. The restraint, and everyone else. Frozen, the manager's hand tightened around the counter edge. He cleared his throat, attempting control, but his voice lacked authority. It was handled professionally. Professional, the reporter said softly, barely above a whisper. Because from here, it looks like silence is stronger than words, and dignity. Stronger than intimidation. The staff exchanged quick glances, some nodding, some hesitant. Narration, even in whispered questions. The power of observation could topple carefully built facades. The world beyond the cafe began noticing what had long been ignored inside. A coworker whispered to another, "People are talking. Outside on social media they've seen it all, and the video." The reporter asked, pen poised, "It's everywhere. Everyone's wondering why she didn't respond with anger." "She doesn't need to," another whispered. "Quiet says more than yelling ever could." The manager's eyes darted toward the table again, noticing her composed expression, the calm that left no cracks. He swallowed, words failing. The reporter smiled faintly, closing her notebook. Narration, sometimes. It was a question, softly spoken, that shifted perception more than any confrontation, and the cracks in authority became impossible to ignore. The cafe hummed faintly, the reporter still scribbling notes in the corner. The manager reached for a cup of coffee, hands tense, fingers stiff. The barista's eyes flicked toward him, aware of every micro-movement. The cup tilted. A drop of coffee wobbled on the rim before settling back. The manager froze. He gripped the counter, knuckles white, trying to compose himself. "You okay?" a coworker asked, voice soft, almost hesitant. Yes," the manager said, voice clipped, too quick. He set the cup down with a controlled slam, eyes darting toward her, noticing her serene gaze. The barista whispered to another, "Look at him, shaking. He's never like this. I've never seen him lose control." Another muttered voice, barely audible over the muted cafe chatter. The manager took a deep breath, trying to steady trembling fingers. He brushed imaginary crumbs from the counter, avoiding eye contact. Narration, each tiny slip amplified what had been unspoken. Privilege, once assumed invulnerable, trembled under quiet dignity and public attention. The woman at the table didn't move. Calmness radiated from her, composed, untouched. The reporter glanced up, pen hovering, noting every detail. Maybe take a break," suggested a hesitant staff member. "I'm fine," the manager said again, voice brittle. His jaw tightened, lips pressing together as if to hold back a storm he couldn't name. Narration, in the smallest actions, the imbalance of power became visible. A tipped cup, a shaking hand signals louder than arguments, louder than authority. The world was watching, and cracks once invisible now glimmered under scrutiny. A barista carefully set another cup in place, eyes lingering on the trembling manager. Silence stretched, every movement under microscopic observation, and the aura of control began to crumble like coffee spilling over porcelain. The kitchen door clicked shut. A barista leaned against the counter, arms folded, eyes sharp. To coworkers, huddled near the prep table, speaking in hushed tones, "Did you see that?" One whispered, voice low, almost conspiratorial. "He's losing it. I've never seen him tremble like that." "I know," the other replied, and she didn't even flinch, like she knew something we don't. The barista listened quietly, a calm presence amid murmurs. Narration. For years the manager had been protected favoritism, inside jokes, unspoken rules, alliances whispered in shadows, doors closed against scrutiny. But the cracks were widening, and even silence became loud. They always cover for him, you know, the first coworker said, eyes darting around. HR turns a blind eye, favors made, promotions skipped, all because of who he knows. Maybe it's different now, the second muttered. That video, people are seeing, can't hide it anymore. The barista's gaze didn't waver, composed, steady. No whisper reached her, no secret sway altered her presence. She stacked cups and wiped counters with deliberate precision, every movement controlled, deliberate. Narration. While others whispered about loyalty and corruption, she moved through, the tension untouched, embodying the dignity that authority could not command nor social media shake. One coworker glanced nervously toward the office, then back. If he collapses, if HR finally acts, what happens to us? Stay quiet, let her handle it, the barista said softly, almost more to herself than them. Everything will unfold without our interference. Silence settled. The murmuring ceased. Even the air seemed heavier, charged with anticipation. Narration. Behind closed doors, alliances whispered, privileges teetered, and the system once impermeable was quietly shifting, one unnoticed act of dignity at a time. She adjusted her apron, fingertips brushing the fabric with deliberate care. The murmurs from the staff kitchen reached her ears, but she did not respond. A mind traced the clip, the viral spread, the whispers in hushed corners, and the weight of history pressing softly yet firmly against her. Some things are bigger than me, she thought, letting the words settle. Narration. In a world that favored privilege, she understood the invisible scaffolding that upheld authority, the biases woven into promotions, conversations, and silent nods. To fight every slight would exhaust her, but to stand with dignity and compose could change more than a single moment. From the prep counter, a coworker's voice broke her thoughts. Do you think anyone's going to step up? HR, management? She shook her head slowly. Some things are bigger than us, she murmured, softer than the whisper of the coffee machine. But if we don't, let them see what happens without interference. She interrupted gently, voice steady, measured. Narration. Her restraint was not weakness, it was strategy, an assertion of power that did not need shouting, an argument made in the quiet strength of patience. The manager paced near the counter, hands tightening around a clipboard. The barista's calm presence contrasted sharply, her composure like a mirror reflecting the manager's internal unraveling. Eyes darted, lips pressed, attempts at control faltering. One of the junior staff leaned closer, hesitant. I've never seen her like this, just calm, even when he's exactor, she replied. It's not about him. It's bigger. Always has been bigger than one person. Narration. In every silent nod, every measured step, every untouched hand, she carried a lesson for the room. Justice does not always shout. Sometimes it breathes quietly, shifting power with nothing more than presence. The barista wiped down the counter, her movements deliberate, controlled. Voices floated from the small crowd outside the cafe, smartphones recording, murmurs spreading like wildfire. She heard snippets. Did you hear how she was spoken to? And that's not the first time, right? A coworker leaned in, voice low. You think people will finally notice? She glanced at them, calm as ever. They already are. From the corner, another voice, hesitant. I mean, remember last month when she was told her ideas weren't worth noting in the meeting? She nodded slightly, letting the memory linger. Narration. Every overlooked suggestion, every dismissive glance, every quiet insult had been small, almost invisible, but patterns don't lie. They accumulate, and in this moment, even silence spoke louder than authority. Everyone's talking, someone whispered, almost afraid to say it out loud. Even the regulars, they're sharing the clip. Yes, she said softly, and now they see what we've been too scared to name. Narration. Power rests on repetition, on the invisible, acceptance of small wrongs. When the small cracks become visible, the foundation trembles. The manager's face twitched as he watched from behind the counter, lips pressed tight, eyes darting. This isn't fair, he muttered under his breath. Fair? She asked quietly, voice steady. It's never been about fair. It's about what's been happening all along. A few staff exchanged nervous glances, the realization dawning that the authority they had followed unquestioningly was now faltering. Narration. The quiet dignity of one person exposed the repeated wrongs that had been hidden in plain sight. Every microaggression, once invisible, now gathered weight, and in that accumulation, the manager's control slipped further, leaving him alone with his unraveling composure. She straightened, eyes forward, calm as ever. No words, no anger, just presence. The authority that once silenced now faltered under the light of truth. The barista stacked the last of the cups, her expression calm, collected. Voices from the street and cafe blended into a low hum, the viral clip looping in someone's phone nearby. She didn't flinch. The CEO stepped closer, eyes scanning the scene. Something, a small pendant around her neck, glinting under the cafe lights, caught his attention. He froze for a heartbeat, recognition flickering behind his gaze. Narration, a single detail, almost invisible to everyone else, suddenly broke through layers of habitual oversight. In that suspended moment, awareness collided with authority, and the weight of repeated injustice pressed on a single observer. He leaned slightly toward his assistant, voice quiet. "Do you see this?" The assistant shook her head, unsure. I think so. Every time," the CEO murmured. "Every subtle dismissal, every whispered comment, it all adds up." A coworker whispered across the counter, hesitant. "She's handled it so well, always calm." "Yes," the CEO said, eyes fixed on the barista. "That's what makes it undeniable." Narration, power had long shielded those accustomed to silence and compliance, but recognition by someone with authority begins to unravel the invisible protections. Even before a word is spoken, the manager shifted, sensing the weight in the room. It's not what it looks like," he stammered, voice tight. She looked up briefly, steady gaze, but said nothing, just presence. Narration, her quiet endurance held a mirror to the system, forcing scrutiny, forcing reckoning. The CEO straightened, tension settling over him. "We need to address this, immediately." Around him, staff exchanged nervous glances. Something subtle had shifted. Authority was no longer unilateral. The invisible power once wielded unchecked was now tempered by observation, by truth, by the calm dignity standing silently in front of them all. Phones buzzed, screens glowing on tables, fingers hesitating before scrolling. Patrons leaned in, whispers soft but urgent. She didn't even move when he shouted. One voice said, barely audible, "Yeah, she just stayed calm." Another replied, glancing at the barista who wiped the counter with steady hands. Narration, the room seemed to inhale collectively, holding tension in every corner. Silence itself became a force, shaping the way power was perceived, and authority questioned outside. The social media storm fanned silently. Notifications multiplied, hashtags forming a quiet chorus. Hashtag quiet dignity. Hashtag justice observed. The manager shifted uneasily, jaw tight, eyes flicking to the barista and back to the patrons. It's just a misunderstanding," he muttered. Voice thin, a coworker, voice barely above a whisper said, "Everyone's watching. It's all out there now." Narration. Public opinion had begun to crystallize. The invisible audience, once passive, now carried weight. Authority, previously unquestioned, trembled under the pressure of collective scrutiny. The CEO stepped closer to the barista, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "People notice when someone refuses to be diminished. You make it clear who holds the quiet power here." She nodded slightly, eyes steady, speaking softly. "Some things are bigger than a single outburst." A patron nudged another, whispering, "Did you see the manager? He doesn't know where to look." Narration, every glance, every murmur, became a measure of shifting control. The barista's composed presence amplified scrutiny. The manager's authority frayed incrementally, exposed in the tension of waiting and watching. He swallowed, voice low and broken. Maybe, misread the situation." The CEO's gaze remained fixed, steady and unwavering. Narration, even without a word spoken to the masses, public anticipation had already begun its work, reshaping perception and sowing the first seeds of accountability. The barista stacked cups slowly, deliberately, each movement measured. Her hands didn't tremble, though the hum of conversation seemed louder than ever. The manager lingered near the counter, jaw tight, eyes darting to the CEO, to the patrons, back to the barista. I don't understand how this escalated," he muttered, voice low. "You underestimated her," whispered a server behind him. "You thought fear kept people quiet. It doesn't anymore." The air thickened with anticipation. A pause, pregnant with judgment. Each observer, in their own corner, measured authority and dignity, noting the cracks that had been invisible for too long. The CEO's gaze didn't waver. "You've ignored more than a single incident," he said softly, voice steady. Patterns matter. Silence isn't compliance, it's endurance, and she embodies that. The manager's throat worked. I can explain. No. The CEO interrupted gently, letting the word hang. Not yet. Watch. Listen. Understand. Before you speak, a customer leaned toward another. You feel it, right? The shift. I've never seen someone stay that calm. While he's losing it, came the reply. Narration. The calm before the storm stretched taut. Power, once assumed, quivered. Authority began to retreat, observed and measured. The barista, though quiet, radiated a strength that made onlookers reconsider every prior judgment. The manager's shoulders slumped subtly, a micro-expression of defeat. The barista didn't look up, didn't react beyond her measured movements. Finally, the CEO exhaled slowly. Soon they'll see the full picture, he said, voice carrying weight. And when they do, the reckoning begins not with noise, but with clarity, with truth. Narration. Everything was poised, the stillness, the watchful eyes, the anticipation. What was coming would unfold naturally, without spectacle, but its impact would ripple beyond the room. Patience and composure had already shifted the balance of power. The barista placed the last cup down, fingers lingering slightly on the counter, eyes calm. Around her, the hum of the cafe was heavy with expectation. The CEO stepped forward, voice cutting through the murmurs. Explain why she's been treated like this. The manager's face paled, lips parting, but no words came. He swallowed, the effort visible, a fine tremor running through his jaw. You're going to speak, the CEO continued, gaze unwavering. Now I don't. You don't what? The CEO's tone remained low, measured, but each syllable carried weight. You think silence protects you, or maybe it hides something deeper, a staff member muttered under her breath. Finally, someone's asking. The manager's eyes flicked toward the barista, then back to the CEO. I didn't mean for intent doesn't erase impact. The CEO interrupted. You wielded authority. People noticed, they endured, and now, he gestured subtly to the phones, the cameras, the patrons. The world is noticing too. Narration. Power, once assumed, faltered in microseconds. Every bead of sweat, every shifting posture revealed cracks. The barista's composure amplified the disparity, her restraint a quiet mirror to his unraveling. I can explain, you can try, the CEO said softly, eyes scanning the room. But first, understand that authority isn't control alone. Respect is earned. Dignity isn't demanded, it's witnessed. A brief silence filled the cafe. Chairs shifted, phones lowered slightly, patrons leaning in. The manager's hands clenched at his sides. He opened his mouth, closed it again, swallowed. The barista finally spoke, calm but firm. I never asked for this attention. I only wanted fairness. Narration. And in that simple declaration, the balance shifted completely. Silence had spoken, dignity had risen, and the oppressor's facade crumbled quietly, painfully. The barista's hands rested lightly on the counter, her posture steady. Every eye in the cafe followed, some on phones, some in real time, but her calm never wavered. I just did my job, she said, her voice low but firm. Each syllable carried a weight beyond the words. I served people, I treated everyone, fairly, that's it. The manager shifted uncomfortably, sweat tracing his temples. You don't understand, try me, the CEO said, voice even, the kind that doesn't shout but still commands. I wasn't. The manager faltered, swallowed, glanced at staff, whispering behind hands. His usual arrogance cracked. With each heartbeat, narration, her restraint was a quiet storm, breaking through layers of entitlement without raising her voice. Years of subtle injustice crystallized in this single moment, unmasking the fragile scaffolding of his authority. A patron leaned forward, whispering, she's calm. Yes, murmured another. And right. The barista looked briefly at the manager, then at the CEO. I never asked for recognition. I only wanted to do my job with dignity. That's all any of us deserve. Narration, and in her composed insistence, she reclaimed space long denied. Authority shifted silently, unspoken but unmistakable. The arrogance surrounding the manager, wilted, unprotected by protocol or fear, exposed for all to see. The CEO's gaze softened slightly, a nod toward the barista acknowledging the quiet gravity of her stance. The manager's hands dropped to his sides, trembling subtly. Words failed him. The cafe remained tense, but her presence brought a strange clarity. People recognized right, even without applause. A brief silence fell. The barista's eyes held theirs, unwavering. The truth, calmly spoken, had more power. then any raised voice. A sharp clatter broke the tense silence. The manager's hand shook, tipping a cup of coffee onto the counter. The liquid spread slowly, mirroring the tremor in his composure. A staff member whispered, but the manager barely noticed. His eyes locked on the Barista.com and unwavering narration. The spilled coffee became a symbol, a subtle declaration that control was no longer his. Every movement, every hesitation, broadcast to those watching, recorded by countless phones. Cameras capturing not just a mishap but a fracture in power itself. He grabbed at the apron he'd discarded moments earlier, fingers fumbling, crumpling. The fabric, his jaw tightened, sweat glistening under the cafe lights. She's just doing her job, he muttered, almost to himself. Yes, the CEO said softly, voice carrying authority without anger. Exactly that, and yet you made it about control, about fear. The barista didn't speak. Her hands rested lightly on the counter. Steady, she didn't need to. The contrast spoke volumes. Narration, empty chairs around them seemed to echo. His isolation, colleagues, once deferential, now leaned back, observing quietly. The public, watching through screens, felt the collapse unfold in real time. Authority, long protected by arrogance and protocol, shrank before a simple truth, dignity. Has weight. A patron murmured. He's unraveling. Another nodded, eyes wide, finally seeing it. The manager slumped slightly, shoulders folding, a man physically present but morally exposed. Phones captured every gesture, every hesitation, narration, symbols of coffee, a discarded apron, trembling hands reeled more than words could. The system's shield cracked, and the audience, real and digital, witnessed the slow implosion of someone who had once felt untouchable. The barista remained composed. The cafe held its breath. True authority needed no shout, no presence. Phones buzzed quietly on tables, screens illuminating faces as the viral clip circulated. Patrons leaned forward, watching the manager's every tremor replayed again and again. She didn't yell once, whispered a regular, eyes fixed on the screen. Not a single shout. Another agreed, shaking her head, and he's melting down every time. Narration, some silences carry weight, some restraint echoes louder than anger. Today, hers did. The barista's calm became a signal, a quiet assertion of truth the world could not ignore. The manager's hand twitched, again, gripping the counter as if it could anchor him. His mouth opened, closed, words failing before they began. You don't understand, he stammered, voice barely audible over the hum of recording devices. Then explain, the CEO said, tone soft but deliberate. Explain why fear guided your actions instead of responsibility. Narration, every paused word, every deliberate breath, was amplified in the public eye. The audience beyond the cafe watched a narrative unfold without embellishment, dignity versus arrogance, restraint against unraveling. Colleagues exchanged glances, their previous loyalty tempered by the evidence before them. The manager tried again, but silence hung heavier than any excuse. A barista across the room stepped closer, offering a subtle nod of solidarity. The main barista met it with a faint, unreadable smile, her posture unwavering. Whispers rippled through patrons, through screens, through social feeds. Narration, silence does not mean surrender. It does not mean weakness. Some silences speak louder than shouts. And today hers declared authority, morality, and calm, while he crumbled, witnessed by the world without a single raised voice. The cafe breathed collectively, the tension palpable, yet restrained. Phones recorded, eyes witnessed, and dignity stood firm. The barista stepped out, apron folded neatly in her bag, phone tucked away. The morning sun caught the edges of the street, casting long shadows across familiar sidewalks. Man paused at the crosswalk, glancing at her, recognition flickering in his eyes. Hey, you're the one from the cafe video, he murmured, almost to himself. She nodded slightly, not a word, just the hint of a smile. Her steps continued, measured, unhurried. A group of teenagers leaned against a wall, phones dangling from fingers. That clip, she didn't even yell, one whispered. She's calm, another added. Like nothing can touch her. Narration, some victories are quiet. Some recognition doesn't come with applause or headlines. Today hers moved through streets in whispers, a silent assertion that dignity carries weight beyond any single confrontation. An older woman crossing the street stopped mid-step, tilting her head. Thank you, she said softly, voice low but sincere, for showing what's right. The barista nodded again. Silence, but not absence. Presence, power. At the corner, A delivery driver leaned out of his van window, thumbs up discreetly. She met his gesture with the faintest of acknowledgments, nothing performative, everything intentional. Narration: the world is never too small to notice. Even unnoticed corners hold witnesses, and even the quietest gestures can ripple outward. Recognition is not always loud, it is measured, seen, and remembered. A cafe she passed, whispered behind curtains. Patrons and staff glanced, some averting eyes, others acknowledging her with subtle nods. She moved past without hesitation. Narration: each step a claim, each nod a validation. Some streets do not just lead home, they carry testimony. Today she walked through recognition, composed, unshaken, and fully seen. Her pace never faltered. The city absorbed her calm. The world began to adjust around it. The barista pushed open the door to the private office, the quiet click echoing against polished walls. The CEO looked up from a stack of reports, eyes meeting hers with measured attention. "You asked to see me," he said, voice low, careful. She nodded once. "Yes, just wanted a moment." He gestured to a chair. She declined with a small shake of her head. They stood across from each other, the space between filled with unspoken truths. Narration: some acknowledgments need no ceremony. Some recognition carries more weight than applause ever could. Today, respect needed no stage, it thrived in restraint. "After everything," she began, her voice steady, "I wasn't sure anyone was paying attention." "I was," he replied softly. I saw. Her gaze flicked to his hands, folded neatly. "It's not about seeing me, it's about noticing what's right, even when it's inconvenient." A pause. He exhaled slowly, as if processing the gravity of decades he hadn't fully understood. "Thank you for seeing me," she said. Again, voice quieter, almost hesitant. "No," he corrected gently. "Thank you for reminding us what dignity looks like." Her lips curved in the faintest of smiles. No flourish, no overt gesture, just acknowledgement. Narration: the power of recognition isn't loud. It doesn't demand applause or viral clips. It exists in the pause, in the careful attention, in the simple, honest exchange of respect. They shared a quiet moment, neither breaking. Both shifted. Outside, the world buzzed, unaware. Inside, time slowed. She nodded once and left, leaving behind no spectacle, only the weight of a lesson subtly absorbed. He watched her go, understanding now that authority without awareness is hollow, and that some truths demand only calm witness. The barista scrolled through her phone while waiting for the evening rush to calm. Notifications blinked insistently, comments, shares, and messages from strangers, friends, even former colleagues. She handled it so well. One message read, another: "I can't believe he looked like that." Narration: the smallest acts of quiet resistance sometimes echo the loudest. Today, a single moment reverberated across timelines, news feeds, and coffee-stained tables alike. A friend called. "Everyone's talking about it. They finally see. They see because it happened," she said softly, "not because I wanted attention." Outside, the cafe's windows reflected more than passing pedestrians. They mirrored shifting awareness, curiosity, and the subtle judgment of the unnoticed becoming noticed. In the manager's office, the antagonist stared at his own reflection in the monitor, clips of his unraveling playing on repeat. His fingers trembled, jaw tight, shoulders slumped. No calls, no messages of support, just silence filled with scrutiny. Narration: unchecked. Privilege, once impervious, fractures when witnessed, and witnessing, when combined with dignity, begins to tilt power in quiet, relentless ways. A colleague whispered nearby, "I've never seen him like this before." "Nor I," another replied, glancing toward the cafe floor. Their eyes found hers for a brief moment, a nod of shared acknowledgement, unspoken solidarity. Her own reflection in the glass caught her attention. Composed, steady, unshaken narration. Every like, every comment, every whispered conversation was part of the shift. The barista didn't raise her voice, yet voices everywhere were rising for her. She hadn't moved a mountain, but she had nudged the world to notice. The manager's isolation deepened as the cafe's energy subtly changed. Patrons lingered longer, offered smiles, and held doors. Outside, the world began learning that resilience has its own gravity. She stepped outside, calm as ever, letting the ripples carry themselves forward. She stood at the edge of the empty cafe, hands folded loosely in front of her, eyes tracing the evening light spilling across the street. The world had shifted, yet nothing had shouted, nothing had erupted violently. Only acknowledgement lingered in the air, tangible in its subtlety. A passerby paused, offering a small nod. She returned it with the same quiet steadiness she had maintained all day. No words, no performance, just presence, narration, some victories. Do not shout, they simply echo, leaving those who watched forever changed. Silence, when earned, becomes its own witness. Inside, the manager's office remained dark, his chair tilted back as he stared at his reflection on the screen. The undone apron, the spilled coffee, the viral footage they haunted more than reprimand ever could. His voice, once commanding, was now reduced to tremors in empty halls. A notification pinged. Another repost, another comment. She didn't raise her voice. And yet, his jaw tightened. The realization of exposure, of accountability, settled deep. Outside she walked slowly, each step deliberate. Friends and strangers alike gave her space, the world quietly bending around the dignity she carried. No banners, no applause, just recognition, reverence in the simplest gestures, a pause, a glance, a silent acknowledgement. Narration. Justice does not always demand spectacle. Sometimes it waits patiently, growing in the cracks of arrogance, in the calm of those who refuse to surrender their dignity. Her reflection lingered in shop windows as she passed. Steady and unwavering, she hadn't needed confrontation to assert worth. She hadn't shouted to reclaim space. And yet, the silence left a mark on witnesses, on the privileged, on those who once thought authority was invincible. A final nod to herself, a deep inhale, and she disappeared into the evening, leaving the world altered, quietly, irrevocably.